Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another cool follow-up for you from the brand Yema. A little bit about them. They're a historic brand revival, and they've been making French watches since 1948. This type of watch, of course, is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language. When you're looking for a dive watch, you're going to want water resistance, typically through some type of screw-down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This particular model is the Yema Superman Heritage Blue. Specifically, this is the 39mm option. With 19mm lugs. There's also a 41mm option with 20mm lugs that is also available. Now, this model, known as the Heritage Blue Superman, essentially it's a reissue of the original that was used by France's Air Force pilots back in the 1970s. This particular model's price is actually at $11.99 direct on the bracelet, guys. So this is not your typical kind of more entry-level Yema that you've seen on the channel, which I've actually really enjoyed. Honestly, I was a little bit skeptical, although you know, I really love the design. I was a little bit skeptical about the finishing, considering the big price jump versus, you know, your more average entry-level Yema models. I am very, very pleased to report back to you guys that, wow, I'm blown away. There's definitely a huge difference in the fit, in the finish, just the overall attention to detail, the execution of this piece versus some of Yema's more affordable offerings. So with all that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay guys, let's look at this thing. I mean, wow, an absolute looker here. Man, really beautiful. Now, again, to quickly cover the dimensions, case size is 39mm in diameter, 12mm thickness there with the height, and then only 47mm lug to lug. Although, even though it's a female end link, you can see that the style of it actually does cause the links to jot out quite a bit, but it continues this lovely curve. So you'll notice this on your wrist that it actually still wraps really, really well. One of the, oh man, guys, this crystal, I mean, wow, that box dome style vintage, man, it just oozes vintage, but at the same time it has this really refined, really kind of dressy quality about it that I really, really dig. And it's something that kind of caught me off guard because overall I really like the design, you know, and that side of it. I dig the transitional blue dial there. I love that with the high contrast. You can see the nice bright vibrant blues and then the very dark you know, near black kind of midnight blues that are there. I just really enjoyed that. The high polished areas, you know, in contrast to the brushing, really, really handsome. But there's just something about the way everything comes together that just makes it just such an enjoyable and gorgeous piece. I mean, there's something about this that just screams vintage in so many ways, but it also has a way of screaming absolute quality. I'm really blown away. And again, it's not like it's doing a bunch of really like tricky things. There's like not a bunch of like crazy chamfers and transitions or anything like that. But what it does do is it just distills you know, what it needed to do, and it just executes. It just does it so well. So a little bit more about here. Of course, we do have that beautiful box dome sapphire with inner AR coating. We have a 120 click unidirectional bezel with a sapphire insert. It's not loomed. And then obviously for me to turn this, it's actually locked because it has that unique kind of old school crown lock, well, bezel lock there. So now it's kind of loose, which is a bit of a something to get used to because it is quite loose there, just kind of hanging, but we'll get this going. Very nice. I mean, there's a tiny bit of back play, but it's very, very smooth, real easy to operate, lined up very nicely. And then essentially you just take this, and of course a little bit more difficult with gloves on, but there you go. Now it's locked in. It's not going anywhere. So really nice from that standpoint. I gotta say, You know, as much as I do like to fidget. Ooh, actually it's over a little bit, guys. Come on. I can't do the rest of the review like that. Let's get it back lined up perfectly. So anyways, let's listen to this again. Okay, so there we go. That's perfectly realigned. We'll get this back in now, get the screw going. Of course, doing it with gloves on isn't great. Okay, so, man, beautiful, guys. I gotta say, in person, in the metal, there's something really special that this watch does that cannot be captured in pictures. There's just something about it. Aesthetically, this is just one of the most gorgeous dive watches I think that's on the market right now, and there's some cool ones they have coming out, and it's going to be hard for me to kind of process that, because this is one that I've always really had an eye for, but in person I think I like it even more than it exceeded my expectations, which is cool because that doesn't always happen. Anyways, so that was a 120 click bezel, unidirectional sapphire insert. Inside here we actually have a Sellita SW200-1. It has this really nice stamped case back, so you can't see it, but the movement in there is nice and obviously keeps good time. It's Swiss movement. Now when we look at the dial and hands and the just beautiful display in general, of course you get that beautiful sunray blue dial, you get applied indices, and you get Superluminova C5, which is an interesting choice. I think it gives it a nice little pop of kind of a minty color to it there in daylight, and then it's green. It's not the strongest lume there is, but I think it's kind of an interesting choice that gives it just a little bit of kind of a vintage vibe without it being like Fotina, which for me is something I can enjoy. I think they would have been fine with C3, you know, X1, but the C5, I have to say, does add quite a bit of character. Now this one is and it's really just something about Yemas in general that I feel like we kind of overlook and really take for granted, is that it's 30 bar. Right, so 300 meters of water resistance or 990 feet. So this is legit. This is like a legitimate dive watch. It's not a dive look. It's not like an Oris Aquas, you know, or I'm sorry, not Oris, but an Oris Oris Diver 65, where it's just like dive style. This is a legitimate, like, professional level, heavy duty dive watch that just happens to have some real major legs. I mean, this is a looker, guys. Of course, the bracelet is 19 millimeters, which that's not great, but you know what? A 20 millimeter strap will fit on there just fine. You just kind of have to squeeze it. It uses pin and collar connectors, which isn't you know, the easiest thing to do, but the nice thing is when you use pin and collars, once you set it, you forget it. You never have to go back. You don't have to worry about Loctiting. You don't have to worry about threads getting stripped or anything like that. You just have to worry about doing it right the first time you set it and then just leaving it alone, which I think is great. So I can't get mad at it for pin and collars, especially when some super high-end watches that are out there, you know, like Pateks and stuff, are still using pin and collars as well. All right, now the clasp itself is, you know, I think there's a bit of a point of contention here because it could be nicer just because the rest of the watch is so nice, but I think proportionally and also with the theme thematically, it's fine, and it does the job. So it's friction fit flip lock, so it's a little tough with the gloves on because I can't get my nail under there, but here we go. Signed nicely with the Yema Y. And then of course the milled folding section. This is stamped here, but you do get a really nicely milled dive clasp, which is great. I mean, this is the kind that you'd typically see on some, you know, on a nice Squale or Devosa. So it fits nicely there, and I think that obviously the proportions wise, it looks great. I really love that dramatic taper there. Look at that taper, so refined, so well done. But you know what, guys, let's go ahead and get this piece on wrist so you can enjoy some of the magic from that angle. All right, guys, woo! Look at this bad boy in blue. Great wrist presence, even though it's only a 39, and a lot of that has to do with the way the lugs just flow into those nice wide bracelet links. Very, very nice. And it does taper down to 16 millimeters, which is a great taper, and it just adds another level of refinement. Also, great mobility within the wrist. You can see from far away, it still has quite a bit of visual impact. Up close, it might seem a little bit large, but you know what? That's just some lens distortion. But as you can see, it lays really nicely on the wrist, and and the way that these are a little bit kind of fixed feeling in the female end link there, it still works because it just guides this, as you can see, right around the wrist still. I mean, unless you have some like insanely small wrist, maybe I wouldn't recommend the bracelet. Otherwise, you know, this thing is gonna wear beautifully. Of course, I do have a 7 1/4 inch wrist, so this thing wears really nicely. I really enjoy the way this looks, the way this feels. I like the tones of blue. I like the way it shifts in the light. I like how there's just little spots of black there that just really tie in with that bezel insert. So that's really nice. And then obviously we have this nice crown that sticks out, and it's just generally a handsome piece. I like the compartmentalization there on the actual case itself, where the mid case looks super thin. Then you kind of have this like top hat bezel structure, and then you have like this little bubble back case back. So it really helps that mid case appear super duper slim, and this thing just rocks on the wrist. It almost looks like at a glance some type of integrated bracelet, which obviously is pretty in style right now. So if it was integrated, we'd probably still enjoy it. So with that said, let's actually get to some low light transition and lume shots. All right, guys, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, this is probably my only drawback, is that the vintage nature is evident there with that vintage lume. And it's not necessarily patinaed lume or weak lume. It's more so just the application. The nice thing, though, that's kind of a bit of a secret there that people don't really talk about, is because of the way that those markers are actually made. They're very chunky and very reflective and actually catch the light really well. But this portion here I like to call low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field in direct sunlight. A lot of the times you're of course going to be coming in and out of a vehicle, in and out of a building, you know, walking underneath an overhang. But the nice thing is here, as you can see, those really nice applied indices actually do catch a fair amount of light, and they kind of add a little bit of glint and glitter and a little bit more mass to what you're looking at. Although of course as you get darker here, it seems like a very thin sliver of that C5. When you're actually getting light on it, you can see it catches in different ways. It casts a shadow and negative space onto the dial. So there's a lot of different ways that it can communicate that depth and that legibility with you, which I really, really like. Also, you can see here, as we'll get closer and get some real high contrast, some harsh lighting, you can see a little bit of that high polished little cloudiness, but that's just from the sweat, because my hot studio lights get this room really hot. I don't have AC, got the window open, that's why you guys can hear the birds chirping. You probably can even hear a fan on low because it is a warm summer. But guys, this thing is gorgeous, and look at the way that the light dances over the brushing. Very, very uniform. Look at that, guys. And also still quite legible when we get into that kind of intermediary lighting there. Ooh, man, that is a good looking watch. Guys, so closing thoughts on the wrist. Of course, this thing has very classic proportions, really fits almost any situation, and it absolutely oozes vintage appeal. Wow, this thing just drips the sex appeal. This thing has legs, it's gorgeous. There's really no way around it, and it has a very particular aesthetic. Are there other dive watches that are out there that look great? Yes, of course there are, and I own a lot of them. But when it comes to nailing that vintage aesthetic, wow, Yema just have a way with what they do. They did something really special with this, and it does feel like a $1,200 watch. I mean, it feels like it could be $1,500, $1,700 bucks. I mean, it depend, like if this had a Swiss made brand on it, you know, and it was a heritage brand from Switzerland, they'd probably charge a lot more. This little French diver is something really, really special. Now, when it comes to model variants, like I mentioned, we also do have this available in the 41mm size with the 20mm lugs, but it's very similar, you know, obviously just barely sized up in its dimensions. Now, as far as comparable models go, guys, there are a ton of vintage inspired divers out there, but there are very few, honestly, that have this beautiful, unique look with this level of actual heritage, guys. It's just, bottom line, a very handsome and capable sports watch offering a ton of style with a very unique heritage. I mean, the whole Yema story is quite interesting. I love the reissues that they've been coming out with, as well as their new designs. So I'm just really impressed with them. And, you know, at one point in time, French watchmaking was huge, right? Before it was big in Swiss and big in Japan, it was big in France. So really cool to kind of see something with this heritage, this lineage, kind of make a really strong comeback. And I gotta say, I'm very, very impressed by this timepiece. But you know what, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.